circumstances. And God said, okay, I'll have a showdown. And God brought over his pile of dirt, and he went, and he formed a man out of the pile of dirt. And so the atheist walks over to the pile of dirt, and he begins to whip out his beakers and his chemicals and everything like that, approaching the pile of dirt. And God said, get your own dirt. Showing the point that even the dirt came from God. That if you come to an empty room and you don't have dirt, where are you going to get dirt from? From God, because it requires God to create it. All right. And Moses verily was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after. So Moses had, it's not, we got to, in life and in your mind and in Christianity and in all things, we got to step out of everything being strictly binary thinking. Okay? In other words, when we say that Jesus Christ is to be exalted, it doesn't mean that everyone else has absolutely zero significance or zero value. All we're saying is Jesus Christ is the focus of everything. So, therefore, you must be an enemy of Moses. No, we're not saying that. Come with me again to the verse. What does it actually say here? And Moses, verily, that means truly. Okay, that's meant for emphasis. Was faithful in all his house as a servant, not as a master, for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after. So Moses submitted himself as a servant. Okay, in fact, you see that language a lot more in the Old Testament than you do in the New, about someone being a servant of the Lord. I think I hope you understand that in the New Testament, there's more emphasis put upon you being a child of God than on you being a servant of God. See, servants work. They're known for their work, the things, the tasks they do. In the New Testament, you should feel more than you feel an obligation to do work for God. You should be, in fact, before you do work for God, I want you to have a sense of your kinship with God. Don't get those out of order, and don't put a higher priority on the things you do or the work you do for God. Put an emphasis on first believing the right things, having the right attitude about your standing with God. Then go off and do some work and do some nice things for Jesus if you want to. As a result of you understanding of that unconditional closeness and the unconditional love, draw upon the strength you receive from knowing those things. And then you will feel like serving God, okay? I know that's terribly simple, and so simple, it can really blow by some people, but that's what I'm saying. This requires a lot of listening, not with just your ears, with your heart. Because if you don't engage your heart, I can't promise you that I have the wisdom or the words to compensate for what you lack in terms of a willingness to learn this. I will try. I really want to break this down and make it simple and understandable to you, but you must engage your heart. You must try to say, what is he actually trying to tell me here? What is he trying to say? Because I admit the weakness that I am as a vessel, but I'm going to preach my heart out, and I'm going to try to teach this to you, okay? Because I want you to experience the love and the joy that comes from knowing these things. Verse 6, but Christ as a son over his own house. Whose house? We are. We're the house. Okay, so now go back in your free time and read some of those previous verses where it talked about house, and you realize the point of the whole metaphor was to talk about you. Okay, in those previous verses where it mentioned house and Moses was faithful over all of his house, that's what we're talking about here. It's really boiling it down. See, what we do is we use the Old Testament from things that actually happened, but they are also a prefigure, the Bible says. In other words, along with being actual historical events, they're also figurative of spiritual realities. Spiritual realities. Does this seem like it's getting kind of nebulous and weird, this sermon today? It's doing so because I'm not speaking of earthly things, I'm speaking of spiritual. And if you're dead spiritually inside, you may not understand what I'm going to have for you today. You may not even get it, which is unfortunate. But if you have a heart that wants to know, that wants to understand, I absolutely believe there's something of value for you today. Here. So, Old Testament things, along with being true, factual, historical events, also became symbols through which God taught lessons for spiritual, sometimes abstract truths. Okay? Whose house we are, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope unto the end. So, this is not, well, let's start addressing some of the things before we get too far in this, because I can see where people would take a verse like this and begin to draw away a false interpretation of what's being said here. That word if is not conditional upon you being a member of Christ. You don't have to maintain anything. You don't have to be faithful unto the end. Why? Because Jesus was faithful unto the end to be the captain of your salvation. This basically says your rejoicing and your hope and your confidence, that is contingent upon you. Your confidence, your rejoicing, and your hope is going to be contingent upon how much you believe and understand yourself and see yourself as a son. You're still a son. You're still a daughter of the King, no matter what. Okay? But if you don't see yourself as that, you won't have confidence. You won't have rejoicing. You won't have hope. That's all dependent on you. How are you going to choose to view yourself? Do you want to see yourself as a servant? Do you want to see yourself as a son? It's right there. You are heir. You're a co-heir with Christ. And you are a son. So if you see yourself as a servant, you're seeing yourself incorrectly. Let me ask you this real fast before we move on. Who pleased Jesus more? Martha or Mary? Martha, who was up about doing lots of things and even told Jesus that he should scold her sister, who was just sitting down doing nothing. She wasn't sitting down doing nothing, though. She was sitting down listening to Jesus teach her. And actually what Jesus did, because the other one, who was a picture of the law, by the way, tried to rebuke her sister for being too lazy, God turned around and actually rebuked her in a soft and loving way. She said that, you're busy about many things. And he goes, I'm not even giving you beef for that. But listen, now you jumped in here and you started attacking your sister for doing something smart, which is listening to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. She has this opportunity to sit down and talk and listen to God speak to her in one-on-one. Now let me ask you a question. Is there anything that's more important to you than sitting down and listening to God? If you had the opportunity, what kind of thing would you put as a priority above that chance? That woman in a lowly place, in a lonely place in Israel, in an undramatic fashion, she was sitting alone in a one-on-one conversation with God himself. And her sister wanted her to stop and help her pick up some dishes. Some people just don't get it. Is it wrong to pick up dishes? No. But when you have the chance to talk to God, yeah, it'd be kind of dumb. Okay, so wherefore, as the Holy Ghost saith, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness. Now we're starting to really get to where the rubber meets the road. As you may recall, this is very important material to know. We are going to go back in future sermons, and we're going to touch on some of the Old Testament passages that it's referencing here. But in the day of provocation, that's the day where they didn't want to go into the wilderness. They didn't want to go into the promised land, because they had heard all these rumors about if they go over into the wild land, there's these powerful cities with high walls and huge men that would just be able to crush us. Let me tell you something. The problems in your life are bigger than you. I said it again, see it again. The problems in your life are bigger than you. You're right to assume that and assess that. And the picture in the Old Testament that we're going to look at later on is going to confirm that. So I'm not going to invalidate your feelings right now. You're feeling the cause of your fear. I'm not really going to invalidate it just yet. But we're going to stick with me a bit. So you have, especially in this day and age with the virus and everything going on in the world, we have reason, we have cause to have fear, right? Because what's going on in the world. So yes, those problems are bigger than you. All your life problems are bigger than you. But your problems are not bigger than God. And that's the thing we gotta concentrate on. Our problems are never bigger than God. So if you get these things straight in your head, if you'll allow your beliefs to change, if you'll allow your heart to change. You see, I didn't ask you to do anything today. I asked you to believe differently. I didn't say stop lying, stop gossiping, stop cheating on this and that, and your tests and your taxes. And I didn't tell you any of that stuff. I said believe differently. Change your thinking. Change your attitude. And I'm always going to emphasize that piece. Because I know for sure that if your beliefs change, everything else you do in life will just follow. But the emphasis in the Old Testament is always on things that we believe over the things that we do. So, and I don't mean to say just New Testament, we're under a new covenant. And it says, harden not your hearts. Well, I don't harden my heart. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And you do it more subtly and more often than you think you do. Anytime God says, go forward into that thing that looks scary and dangerous to you, and you don't, it's because you stubbornly hardened your heart. It provoked God. Now, don't get worried, because if you're saved, that sin is forgiven of you, and you're not going to be seen through that. But guess what? You're also not going to go into a promised land that has all the benefits. Listen, I live in Florida now. I live in a city called Bonita Springs now. It is sunny. It is beautiful outside already. But if you choose to stay in a state that's gloomy in the north, don't feel bad or don't desire the benefits of living in Florida when you live in the north, and vice versa. If you want some of the benefits of living in the north, don't move to Florida. If you want the benefits of the promised land, you don't get them ever by staying where you're at. I'll say it again. If you want the benefits of the promised land, you don't get there by staying where you're at. And the only thing preventing you from going forward into those things that you know God is calling you unto and into is your fear. And you're still hardening your heart. Fear is a method of hardening your heart where you just say, no, I'm not going to go there. It scares me. But God's saying, come on, it'll be okay. Trust me. Didn't Jesus tell Peter, hey, why don't you come out of that boat and join me? Peter said, okay, it is the Lord telling me to do it. And he swung his leg over and got onto that water and walked out to Jesus. And right now, God's calling you to do things that you're afraid of. And the only reason they're not getting done, even though you know that along with it comes a lot of, you sense that there will be blessing on the other side of it. You sense that there'll be glory on the other side of it. You sense that there'll be wealth, health, and further grace and mercy on the other side of it, but you're just stuck. And here's why. We're just trying to teach you things to empower you, not to berate you, okay? All I did was identify the problem. I don't want you to feel bad, okay? I don't want you to feel condemned. I don't want you to feel dirty, ugly, or undesirable to God. You're not. I'm just revealing where you're stuck. And the reason why we're doing that is to move you forward. That's all, okay? So, do I got you to the point now where you're not beating yourself up? You're not harping on yourself? Good, because I don't want you to do that. Now let's just see the good news that's beyond this. Where am I getting stuck? And how do I go forward to this? Well, we're going to keep on teaching you, okay? So, it says verse 9, when your fathers tempted me. See, that's actually that could be the thing that would really anger God. There's a few things that are discussed in the New Testament that anger God and that grieve him. They tempted him. They were like, tempted means they're doing things that make him say, that makes God say, should I be mean to them or shouldn't I? And it says they tempted him, but they also proved him. That means that they had successes along the way where they should have known, based on the things they've already seen God do in their life, that God had them. God had them protected. God was going to provide for them, and God's going to take care of them. He had already proven that to them from the time they were leaving Egypt, and God saw them through all the plagues. God gave them gold from the Egyptians, and then God led them out into the wilderness, and they were protected with a pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, and they saw the splitting of the Red Sea. So these people had reason to believe. You right now, where you're sitting, I want you to go back to your mind and take a minute if you need to, and just kind of go through your index file of your mind and think of just a few times, because we only have so much time here. But make it a practice to do this kind of a thing. Go through your mind and think of the times God has been faithful to you. And if you will remember those times where it came down to like, it was a real nail biter of a situation, and it seemed like you would barely skate through and be successful, Well, you need to reflect on those times from time to time. And see and remind yourself that God has an excellent track record of taking care of you. And you won't feel reluctant to go forward. And then if you see God, you still are poised and you feel you're not really moving forward the way you should, pray for that strength. Pray that God removes the fear from your heart. Pray that God makes a path in front of you that's less cluttered. Pray that God establishes your heart and makes you stronger in heart. It makes you stronger in faith. And He will. He did it for me. But they saw His works for 40 years. And some of us have been Christian for a long time. If you've been saved for 3 or 10 or more years, you really should have a faith that's a little bit stronger than someone that's brand new. Definitely. You may have been working on the wrong things. You may have been working on your moral behavior and trying to get that in order under the power of your own strength and of your own flesh and carnal efforts. But stop that now. And get your attention on things you need to be believing correctly. Because all those good works you're doing for the wrong motive. You're doing them to stay in God's good graces. And because of Jesus' blood, you never got out of God's good graces. You never were out of His good graces. Because it's not about you. Jesus paid for all of your sins. And so when God has provided all these things for us that are benefactors of the gospel, no wonder He gets a little bit angry. And so, or He should be getting a little bit angry. But as I said last week, God shows you how angry He does get at sin, so that way you'll appreciate grace and mercy. Because it's easy to be in this Christian thing and to have forgiveness of sins and, it's okay, Jesus forgives my sins. That's no big deal. Oh, yes, it is a big deal. It most certainly is a big deal. You know why? Because people that were part of His flock, the children of Israel, experienced His wrath, God's wrath, for being reluctant, for recoiling when God calls you forward. So when you don't go forward when God is calling you to, that's the thing that used to tick Him off. Even at His most favorite people on the face of the planet, it still ticked Him off. So that way, when you realize, whoa, God was that angry, and we're gonna go back to those chapters in future sermons where it's referencing here in the New Testament. We're gonna go back and actually look at those so you can experience it firsthand in the next 2 weeks. The next two editions of my preaching on Hebrews. So that's the thing that really torques God, if I can use that language. It really torques him. But you are not going to experience the wrath of that. But because you've been able to see how angry it makes him, ought to make you appreciate that because of his love for you, he's not getting angry at you. So yes, you should still get very versed in understanding the wretchedness of sin. So that way, you'll be spurred to appreciate the forgiveness and the mercy and the grace that you're being offered in the face of our misdeeds. It says, and it's not, look, they're not even really getting angry at what they're doing, it's what they're believing in, their lack of faith. Wherefore I was grieved with that generation, verse 10, and said, they do always err in their heart, and they have not known my ways. They don't even know God. They don't know the reason why he does things. They think everything he does is based on what they do, not on how they see him. See, I don't care if you give me a birthday cake and a card and money and gifts and everything like that, if I know that you really don't even like me. And I know that you're all the same way. If you knew a person that was doing all these things for you didn't really like you or understand you, or thought that, gee, in order for me to maintain my friendship with so-and-so, I better do these things, otherwise they won't like me. That's not God's, you don't know his ways. If you think that you got to do good works to keep God interested in you, you see him as a person who loves conditionally. And then it goes back to the phrase that I said earlier. Many have more faith in God's laws than in his character. It's almost like you Christians, I know how this goes because I was one of them. It's almost like you have like a division in your own mind and in your own heart. Like the things God asks you to do, which are very hard and everything, and then if you do them wrong, you get his cruelty. Then you think of Jesus, and you think of all of his mercy and grace and all the things you benefit. But you don't know how to reconcile those two things in your heart and in your mind. And I lived that way for a very, very, very long time. I said, well, it's probably something beyond my understanding. Both seem so true and so real, and I cannot reconcile them. But God has shown me. The thing is when you understand that the Old Testament was written to a people before you, and it was written for your learning and your teaching, not for your blind obedience, then it becomes more clear to you. So you're actually having faith in God's laws. Well, if I just follow them, it doesn't even matter what my attitude towards God is. It doesn't matter what my attitude towards my fellow human being is. As long as I do those things on that list of paper over there, I'm good. Is that what you really think? You think that's what's going to make you good? Just obedience to that? Well, no, that's actually incorrect. So they have more faith in those laws than in God's character. Now, why do I bring God's character into it? Because it is a matter of his character. You don't need there's two ways to get an agreement with a person. You can get it on paper, and everyone's going to follow the rules and play fair and play nice because of what it says in the paper. And that's the only one keeping people in their sandbox of doing the right thing is the piece of paper. Or it could be like we could just wad up the paper and say, we don't need a prenuptial agreement. We don't need anything because I love you. You love me. I'm the contractor. This is your house. I'm going to do a good job for you. I'm going to do my very best. And then I trust that you're going to compensate me fairly. That's called like a gentleman's agreement. And they seldom work in this world, don't they? Because of our sinful nature, honestly. But I didn't talk about the character of your neighbor. I talked about the character of God here. It's his character that's on the line. And he told you he would be faithful. And when you're reluctant, you're saying, no, you're not, God. No, you're not. I just know that this is going to go bad if I have faith in you and I go forward unto those things that I sense you're calling me unto. And I just don't believe you're going to be faithful to me in that moment. And as shameful as that sounds, and as condemning as it sounds, and I do not mean it to be, but we got to state it for what it is. We need to, so we can begin to treat this thing with the gravity that it deserves, we at least got to call it what it is. And you just told God, and I just told God that, sorry, pal, I don't have the amount of faith to do that right now. I don't have faith in your character. Not faith in faith. I didn't say faith in your ability to conjure faith. This has nothing to do with you. We count him faithful. His faithfulness. Do you have faith in his faithfulness? Not faith in the power of faith itself, in a little idea or a concept. I have faith in faith, and the universe will help me out. That's kind of like that New Agey stuff that Oprah Winfrey and Eckhart Tolle and other people like that. The gift, or whatever it's called. This concept that when you believe the universe will come around and help you out. You know, there is some truth to that. If you send out positive energy, and if you maintain a positive attitude, yes, the world will treat you more kindly. Yes, the universe will treat you more kindly. But that is still not the way for the Christian. The Christian, your faith isn't on how God wound the universe. It's based on his character, on his love of you, and his love for you. So, let me get back to my passage here. All right. And I want you to come down and see, just feel these verses. Don't just read them, feel them, okay? This is God talking, the first person. So, I swear in my wrath. How angry, well, first of all, did you know God could get so angry that he swear? What would make God so angry that he would swear? Well, we just talked about it. And look at the last half. It's quite shocking. They shall not enter into my rest. You see how the people resting was the antidote to God's wrath? It's beginning to show the contrast. And that contrast will continue for my next few sermons. You need to understand that. When you're not resting in God's... See, if you are faithful in God's promises, God has promised you to clothe you, didn't he? Therefore, having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. David said, I have been young and am now old, and have never seen God's children begging bread. Never. Okay? So, are you going to fear? Or are you going to be confident? I'll tell you what, if you have the ability to believe those things, it's going to affect how peaceful and restful you feel on the inside. It's all contingent upon your belief. You can sit there and suffer and rip your guts up inside of yourself and fear of every little thing that twitches, every blade of grass that wiggles, and you're just full of fears. And you're robbing yourself of the joy, and you're being a sucky testimony for Jesus in the process of it. Just so you know. All those little missteps that you're making because of your fear, it makes people look at you and go, there's nothing really going on over there. I guess they don't really have faith in that God they believe in. I mean, I don't see any joy in their life. I don't see any excitement, happiness, or peace. And the reason you don't have those things is because you don't have any faith in God's character. Take heed, brethren, lest there be any of you, now look at this, an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. When you begin to doubt God, that's a departure from him. That's exactly how he sees it. Oh, y'all didn't hear me. I said, when you begin to doubt God, that's a departure from him. And you're alone. To be away from God is to be alone. You don't have any power. You don't have any strength. You don't have any wisdom or intellect outside of him. So the wisest path forward for us as believers is one of belief and rest. See, we already see that being established here. And it's going to be carried on through into the next chapter. Very important lesson. Because you guys are the ones wondering, how come my Christian life isn't going the way I want it to? How come it doesn't feel like the way I thought it should be? Shouldn't I feel kind of bubbly and joyous at all times? Yeah, you kind of should. And you will when you trust God. But you can't have both. You cannot have a lack of faith in God and have all the goodies that come with trusting Him. It just isn't even possible. It's like saying, I want to be in New York and Florida simultaneously. Nope. Can't be done. Can't be done. You cannot be trusting in God and doubting Him at the same time. But verse 11 should stand out in your mind that when his other children, the children of Israel, behaved that way, it made him so angry he swore. It doesn't say that just one time. It's going to say it again in the next chapter to almost identical language. Okay? So it's something that God takes terribly serious. You start messing and tampering with people's ability to have faith. And by the way, when you speak words out into the air that cause other people's hearts to falter and have less faith, what do you think God's feeling should be towards you at that moment? Because I recall in the Old Testament when those 10 bad spies came back and gave a bad report and there was only 2 good spies, because the people believed the report of the 10 bad spies, that made him so wrathful that he swore. It's a serious matter. It's serious in the sense that if you get it right, you're going to have abundance of joy. If you don't get it right, you're going to have a brittle Christian relationship with God. You're going to have your spiritual bones will feel all dried up. Where's the juice in my Christian life? It's a drag, man. Just go out, go to church and shake a few hands, put on my plastic smile, try to make the people at church think like everything's going okay in my life. And that's the problem. It's merely going okay. You don't feel alive. An evil heart of unbelief. See, you never put that together in your mind, did you? You just thought that unbelief was one of those casual sins. It's not like adultery. There's a big sin. That's a big one. Or stealing someone's car. Or defrauding someone out of those are the big sins. None of those sins are mentioned here. And you can go chapters in this book and not see specific sins mentioned. And so much for the theory that the Bible is just a rule book. It's actually an instruction book. It's a peer into the heart of God, as you really want the truth of it. What we're seeing here is you're given a front row and center seat to the heart of God. And this is the cog on which everything turns in the Christian life. So you can ignore it to your own jeopardy, to your own peril. But what I'm saying is this is easier. It has its own set of challenges, and it certainly is hard at times to maintain good belief. But at least it gives you joy. At least it makes you excited, makes you happy to be alive. Okay? And at least you know where the playing field actually is. So verse 12 says, "Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief." Unbelieving is an evil heart. You can pat yourself on the back and you can call it any way you want. When you are not believing, you have an evil heart. I didn't say a heart that's unsaved. I didn't say a heart that God can't forgive, but your attitude displeases God. I maybe beat that horse. But exhort one another. See, this is why we talk. Remember I told you about speaking negatively and discouraging one another? This is why our speech is powerful, people. You have the power to take someone from a position of faith and either take them to a lower peg or to a higher peg. And I said a few weeks ago that even when you're talking words of encouragement to people, it's at least opening up their mind to greater possibilities and therefore setting a better stage for which they could believe that God might do something good for them. So it's always good to be speaking positivity into the air and helping people out and giving them encouraging words. It's always good to do that. It's not always good to be using your mouth to tear people down. That's wrong. Exhort one another daily. How much is that a constant habit of our lives? Daily. Exhort one another daily. It means every single time you see a brother, the first time you see him in the day, you should have something loaded in the chamber, preloaded in the chamber, that you're going to say something good to them. And you're going to leave them, you're going to say a lot more good things to your neighbor than you are bad things. If you have something, just put it in your own mind, whatever categories, however you want to work it out. But in the end, you're going to leave them feeling one way or the other. They're going to feel exhorted or not. At the end, they should feel kind of exhorted. So whatever it's got to be, it should be like a small sliver of some negative stuff. If you got something negative you hear they have to say, with a whole pile of good stuff. Make them feel great. Why? Because you want the same exact thing. Yeah, but no one does it for me. Well, how about you be the adult in the room and you set the tone? So, okay, we're going to stop in verse 13, but I'm going to finish it up. And I'm not going to talk much about what's going on in the world. You guys, if you guys want to know my opinion about anything that's going on in the world, message me or tell me you'd like me to speak more about those things. But I feel like everyone's being hit with it harder. But if you make this practical, what I'm teaching you today, it's actually teaching you everything you need to know about what to do in this day and the time of the world we live in, with the viruses and pestilences and earthquakes and locusts that are going on in the world. I've given you practical information here on how you keep your faith strong in the faith. This was not a comprehensive sermon, but we're beginning to at least show you a different way of looking at your Christian life. The one that gives you more power will connect you way better with God than the old ways. So, let's finish up this verse. Lest any of you, being hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Now, many of you think that means, that's talking about they're being hardened by not obeying the Ten Commandments. But where did you see that in the past 5 verses or so? Where do you get the 10 Commandments? Where do you get the Old Testament for your definition of sin? Meanwhile, I'm staying in the context and I'm seeing the sin is the sin of unbelief. And that's the one that's going to harden your heart. How is it going to harden your heart? Because the more you refuse to step out on faith in God, the more you make that a practice to just say, no, Lord, no, Lord, no, Lord, the cement of your heart begins to harden. And the more you acquire the skill of doubting God, I don't care how many 10 Commandments you follow. I really don't. I do not care. It doesn't impress me a single iota. It doesn't impress God either. This is what impresses God, what I'm talking about today. This is real teaching. So, the more you get skilled at doubting God, because think about it, even the sins that you're all worried about, those are just extensions of lack of belief. And you're all worried about them thinking, well, God will never help me with this sin. Yes, He will. If there's something needs to be corrected in your life, then you just call into question God's character again. And that's what gets Him torqued. Lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So the sin is one of unbelief. That's the chiefest of all sins. So you just make it a matter of practice to always doubt God, and I know He's calling me to do this and this, and because you won't even stop, plant your feet and say, yes, Lord, I hear you calling me to do that, but I do lack the strength to do it. Won't you please help me? You won't even do that. Some of you. Sometimes I don't. It doesn't even occur to me because I've made it too much a practice of doubting God and my heart is accordingly hardened. And now there's the work of softening up my heart again and getting me to a place where I believe God and I go forward without hesitation. And many are in that boat with me. That's why this teaching is fruitful and profitable. And you can begin to understand that as we go forward in this thing, we're all going to get a lot stronger. And the things that are going to rock the rest of the world will not rock us, because we will have seen firsthand the faithfulness of God. So next week, we're going to pick it up in verse 14. We may be doing a little bit of recap, but now we're really hitting into the center and the meat of the matter. If you really wanted to hear me preaching about right living and children, why you should obey your parents, and parents, why you should not provoke your children to wrath, and people, here's how to tithe correctly. If you wanted to hear about all that stuff, sorry, you're not going to hear it for a long time. Because we need to back up and deal with the central issue of why we're not having successes in those other areas. It's here. You're all worked up and you're ugly on the inside. Lack of faith. Hardened heart. Every time. So, dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for the people that tuned in today and people that will watch this at a later point in time. I pray that the words will go out there and they will affect hearts and change hearts. And people will meditate upon these things and purpose and determine in their heart to master this one skill in their Christianity. That is to have an open heart of faith towards you and to see with more clearly that it really does come down to a matter of how we see you in your faithfulness, God. Bless everyone within the sound of my voice with prosperity, financial, health-wise, and relationship-wise. Make their lives full and abundant in such a way that they can't help but see your grace, mercy, and provision in all of it, Jesus. In your name, amen.